Good evening. Good evening. Cheers. Yep. I'm having a libation, drinking a little beer. While I think of it, because I'm sitting here, check this out. I think this little guy is bad ass. You know where I got this? Drama got me this for Christmas. Now tell me that's not awesome. I think it's super cool. This wolf, you put a little cone inset underneath of him. The cap's over there. It screws up in here under him. And when the inset burns, it comes out through his mouth and his ears. Isn't that cool? I thought it was a really good, right on point gift because I really like it. I enjoy it. It's just cool. So thanks, Jeff, if you're watching. Thanks again. I got to make this video because I need to fill in the blanks for some footage that I'm getting ready to meld this with of a repair that I had to do on my bike. So my bike it's all aftermarket stuff. It's a Paul Yaffe frame, soft tail frame with all kinds of crap on it, performance machine shit all over it, and 14 by Frank's front end, and I don't even know what else. Jesse James Villain tank, which is modified and has a little sight glass on the side of it now. So it's a big tire, home built custom, but it has a real Harley Davidson drivetrain in it, which is awesome. Of course, it's better than, to me, I think it's better because it has an actual Harley Davidson title. So it's got a Harley Davidson twin cam 88B engine in it, and I was having an issue not that long ago. Just I think I rode that bike up into November. I think I rode this last year. So what it would do is, very rarely, but it would do it. It got to be a little more frequent. Of course, that's when I couldn't trust it anymore, parked it. But sometimes it wouldn't start. It wouldn't crank. It would do nothing. You push the button, nothing. Which brings me to another point. I like the older stuff because, there again, I have a Kickstarter. I like having a starter. The first bike I ever had that finally had an electric starter on it, I thought it was very convenient. I grew to love that feature very quickly, whereas I had strictly only Kickstart bikes prior to that, Kickstart Harleys and Triumphs. So I like to have the starter, but I want it all. I want to have the starter, but I also want to have a kickstart pedal because you can be almost stone dead and you still get it started. Anyway, that's not the case with these bikes now. They don't put a kicker on anything. So I had an intermittent thing initially where I could ride the bike and maybe go to the gas station, put some gas in it, go to start it. Nothing. But I could typically roll the bike and like I was going to roll start it and not necessarily pop start it from rolling it, but just the momentum and the clunking it into gear and the jerking, whatever it would do, I could hit that starter button and it would start up then. So a short somewhere, some kind of short going on. Here's the problem. Wiring harness on this bastard, the handlebars, the wiring's internally run through the handlebars, inside the handlebars, down through the risers and all that crap for the switches and controls on the hand grips, on the bars. So I set out to fix it. I thought that it was a starter initially, but I put some direct power to the starter. It's the solenoid, jumped it to the solenoid and it cranked, so starter's okay still. So quickly and easily diagnosed it that it's not the starter, it's a wiring issue, it's a short somewhere, some shit like this is going on. Well, rather than go through all that, and I could figure it out, but then what if it's in the handlebars? What if it's in that 4 feet of wiring or whatever that's down through the bars and through the risers and all that shit? Then what do? I gotta tear all this shit apart. So what I opted to do is just get a push button starter for it. And it goes on the end of the starter. You take the little cover off with 3 machine screws. You put this in its place, yada, yada, yada. No more problems. So I'm gonna insert the video here of what it actually looks like, how it actually works and goes together. I think it's a win-win. For a number of reasons. Number one, anytime you can simplify something, I think it's preferable. Especially on a motorcycle, you're out on the road, God knows where you find yourself or what state you might be in. Yeah, and you don't want to have a problem if you can avoid it. So it cuts through a lot of bullshit, makes it a lot simpler deal. The other thing it does is if your battery is so low that it won't turn over fast enough to start the bike, that maybe it's just like, battery's almost dead. Maybe it's even almost clicking. 80% of the time, you could push this starter button and it'll start up. It'll crank because you're cutting out all that resistance to all those wires. You got a real big wire going to the starter as the main battery feed, and that's all you're running on. You're just bridging across that when you push this button in. So for you to see what that actually is and how that actually works and goes together, I'm gonna go upstairs now and stick this rest of the video in here so you can check it out yourself. It might be something that you care to try. Maybe not, whatever, everything ain't for everybody. So, what I'm gonna do is on the end of my starter, let me show you what we're dealing with here. You probably already are down with this. Right there, this cover is gonna come off. It's a simple enough task. This cover comes off, and this little button goes in its place. Let me show it to you. This little button here is going to go in its place. All that's going to do is allow me to have a button here where I can just manually push this button in and get the starter to crank. And that way that switch up top on the handlebar is going to be useless now. Now if I wanted to retain that switch, yeah, I know what I mean. If it worked or I figured it out, I could just put the this wire, this connector back on my solenoid, and this button will not interfere with the normal functionality of the system. So then you could be either or situation. But I don't care about that. I'm just going to eliminate all of that and just put it right there. Now, I've actually seen somebody that wasn't really using their head thinking, just sit down here on the damn concrete floor for now. I saw somebody really wasn't using their head and giving it much thought, but they commented that they had put the button on their bike, right on the reviews of this button on Amazon, and that the only drawback to it, they feel, it works great, but they feel that anybody that is familiar with it and recognizes what that is, they can just walk up to your bike now and just start it up. And that's not true. That is absolutely not true. Because although you always have battery feed to that starter motor, so they could walk up and push the button and crank the engine over, but if there's no ignition, if the ignition isn't on, the bike's not going to run. Nothing's going to do what it's supposed to do. This thing's got a crank sensor, cam sensor, every other damn thing. Of course, the coil's not going to power up. It's not going to have any of that. So if you don't have the ignition on, if the ignition is turned off, because your key is not present in the system, they can't just walk up and push this button and start your bike. It's not going to start. It's not going to start. It's going to crank, but it ain't going to start. But anyway, that would be way out of bounds anyhow. That's almost saying, well, because it's a motorcycle and it's sitting out there and it's exposed and there's no way for me to lock the entire bike up in a box when I park it somewhere, anybody could just come along and sit on my bike. Yeah, sure they can. Sure they can, But does it happen very frequently? No, it doesn't happen. I've seen it happen, but it doesn't happen very much. I've only seen it happen probably a couple times in my whole life. All right, so when you pop this cover off, take these little 3 screws out. You may want to use a little magnet, some kind of a magnet, the end of a little pocket screwdriver or whatever. Say don't drop any of these screws. I didn't use a magnet. I got them all out. It wasn't a big deal, but just in case you don't have as much room as I have in there. And the new one didn't come with a gasket, but there's nothing wrong with this gasket. This rubber gasket's fine. All it's doing is keeping moisture out of there. So I'll reuse this gasket on it. When this cover comes off, this is in here. And you're going to pull this out of here. It's got a spring on the end of it. That goes in that little hole there, and I'm going to show you what you need to do. That's going to go back in, by the way, but you want to take it out momentarily because you want to look at these contacts. All right, let me show you the contact surfaces here. If you look at this thing, see how grimy that is right here? That surface. That's a contact point. I'll put it down here and I'll shine some light on it and you can see what it is. See, that's a contact point all the way around the outside of this thing. It's not very clean. That has to travel inwards and it's going to hit this. Let me show you. See the contacts in there? Let me zoom you in. See that contact point right there? Right? And there's another one up high, up top. Hang on. Up there. Focus, you little son of a bitch. There we go. There's one up high. There's one down lower. I'm going to clean those contacts up. Clean that shit up. And then pop that back in there. So let's get it cleaned up. Alright, so cleaned it up pretty good. You can see in there, if you can see that. I cleaned this up pretty good. Alright, now this goes back in here, in this hole, like this. Just like that. Okay? Now I gotta put the button on there. Alright, and here's the end result. There's the button in there. So turn ignition on, push this button. So it works. Batteries run down. So it works.